The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was a place of wonder. Giant pillars of white stone rose toward a ceiling painted with stars. Hundreds of seats curved around a central platform where speakers stood. Representatives from 34 species sat in their assigned places, talking quietly among themselves or checking their devices. The air smelled faintly of flowers, pumped in to keep everyone calm. Ambassador Una Park walked slowly toward the central platform. She was 63 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a simple style. Her black formal suit was plain compared to the colorful robes and glowing garments worn by the other species. She carried no papers, no tablet, nothing but her voice. The hall did not grow quiet when she reached the platform. Why would it? Humans were a minor contributing species. They had no voting rights. When they spoke, few listened. Una had stood on this platform 47 times in her career. She had made requests, suggestions, and pleas. Most were ignored. Some were laughed at. Today would be different. She pressed the button that requested attention. A soft chime rang through the hall. Some representatives looked up. Most did not. High Speaker Cometh of the Valori sat in the largest chair at the front. He was tall and thin, with silver skin and 4 eyes that always seemed bored. He waved one long hand lazily, giving her permission to speak. Una took a breath. The United Terran Federation formally withdraws its membership from the Galactic Council, effective immediately, she said. Her voice was calm and steady. We wish the Council prosperity. She bowed once, turned, and walked away. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then Cometh laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. How dramatic, he said. Let it be recorded that the humans have chosen to leave. One less species to manage paperwork for. Some representatives chuckled. Others simply returned to their conversations. A few looked confused, but they said nothing. The Ithrani representative, a young female named Riva with pale blue skin and large dark eyes, watched Una leave. Something cold moved in her stomach. But she did not understand why. Una walked through the curved hallways of the council building. Her footsteps echoed against the polished floor. She passed windows that showed the great city of Velarath below, with its floating towers and rivers of light. She had loved this city once. She had believed in it. Her communication device buzzed. She answered without stopping. It's done. The voice belonged to Captain Taekang, commander of the human patrol fleet stationed in the Outer Rim. It's done, Una confirmed. Begin withdrawal. All ships, all personnel, all equipment. 72 hours. There was a pause. Understood. And Una? I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. We tried for 142 years. That's enough. She ended the call and kept walking. 3,000 human ships received their orders that night. They were scattered across council space, patrolling dangerous trade routes, protecting cargo vessels, responding to emergency calls. For decades, humans had done this work. They were fast. They were brave. They asked for nothing in return except respect. Respect never came. Captain Taekang stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Horizon's Edge. He was 45, with a strong jaw and tired eyes. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. On the main screen, he could see the outer rim stretched out like a blanket of stars. All ships reporting in, his second officer said. Withdrawal routes confirmed. Tay nodded. Tell them to take their time. Check every system, every outpost. If anyone needs help on the way out, we help them. That's who we are. Yes, Captain. Outside, the stars were beautiful and cold. Somewhere out there, Krazen pirates waited in the darkness. They had been waiting for years, held back only by human patrols. Tay wondered how long it would take for them to realize the patrols were gone. Not long, he thought. Not long at all. Back on Velorath, Riva sat alone in her small office. She was an analyst, young and unimportant. Her job was to study logistics data, to find patterns and problems before they became crises. Tonight, she found something strange. The humans handled 60% of all anti-piracy operations in council space. 60%. She had never noticed before because no one talked about it. The work was listed under minor patrol contributions in the official records, but it was not minor. It was enormous. She kept searching. Humans ran 70% of deep space search and rescue missions. They maintained water purification systems on 200 colony worlds. They designed the fusion reactors that powered 15 major stations, including the one that kept Valorith's lights on. Riva felt her hands shake. She pulled up more data. Emergency medical response times in human-patrolled sectors were 3 times faster than anywhere else. Trade route efficiency in their zones was 40% higher. How was this possible? How had no one seen this? She gathered her findings and sent a request for a meeting with Counselor Then, a senior Valori official. The request was denied within minutes. Reason given: low priority matter. Riva sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. The cold feeling in her stomach grew worse. Far away, in the shadowed depths of the Outer Rim, a Krazen warlord named Gorath received a message. His scouts had observed the human fleet beginning to move. All ships heading in the same direction. Away, Gorath smiled. His teeth were black and sharp. For 20 years, the humans had hunted his kind. They were relentless, fearless, and annoyingly good at their jobs. He had lost countless ships, countless warriors. He had learned to fear the human patrol vessels that appeared without warning. Weapons hot, demanding surrender. Now they were leaving. Prepare the fleet, he told his captains. The hunting grounds are open. On Earth, in a small house near the ocean, retired Ambassador Gina Cho watched the news. She was 81 years old, with white hair and hands that trembled slightly. She had served the council for 50 years before Yuna. She had warned them, over and over. She had warned them. You cannot build a house on a foundation you refuse to see, she had told them. And you cannot keep what you do not value. They had not listened. She turned off the screen and looked out at the sea. The waves were gentle tonight, rolling in slow and silver under the moonlight. I hope they learn, she whispered to no one, before it's too late. But deep in her heart, she knew they would not learn quickly. Pain was the only teacher some people understood, and pain was coming. The last human freighter crossed out of Council space at exactly midnight, Council Standard Time. Its name was the Gentle Morning, and it carried 300 passengers, including children. The captain, a woman named Hana Yu, looked back one final time at the stars behind her. Goodbye, she said softly. No one in the council noticed. No bells rang. No announcements were made. The humans left the way they had always worked. Quietly, without fuss, without asking for thanks. And the galaxy, not yet aware of what it had lost, continued to spin in the darkness. 3 months passed. The Galactic Council continued as it always had, with meetings and debates and endless paperwork. High Speaker Cometh gave speeches about unity and progress. The Great Hall remained full of representatives who nodded and smiled and pretended everything was fine, but everything was not fine. The first reports came from the Outer Rim. A cargo ship carrying medical supplies was attacked by Krazen pirates. All crew killed. All supplies stolen. Then another attack. Then 5 more. Then 20. Trade companies began to refuse routes through the outer sectors. Too dangerous, they said. The insurance costs were too high. The profits were too low. Ships that once traveled freely now stayed in port, their captains unwilling to risk their lives. Counselor then received daily reports on his desk. Each one was worse than the last. Pirate attacks had increased by 400%. 400%. He read the number 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. This is impossible, he muttered. Where are our patrol ships? His assistant, a nervous young Valori named Keth, checked the records. We have 12 patrol vessels assigned to the Outer Rim, Counselor. 12? There should be hundreds. The humans had hundreds, sir. We only ever had 12. The humans covered the rest as part of their membership duties, then stared at him. Their membership duties? They were a minor contributing species. They had no military obligations. Keth swallowed hard. They volunteered, sir, every year, without being asked. It was listed in the records as supplementary patrol assistants. I don't think anyone realized how much they were actually doing. The counselor sat back in his chair. His silver skin had turned slightly gray. Get me those records. All of them. On the Ithrani homeworld, a planet called Sereth, the markets were running low on food. Sereth was a beautiful world of blue forests and crystal lakes, but it could not grow enough crops to feed its population. For 800 years, they had imported food from the outer colonies. The trade routes were safe. The shipments were reliable. Now the shipments had stopped. Elder matriarch Soma stood before her people in the great gathering hall. She was ancient by Ithrani standards, nearly 400 years old. With skin so pale it was almost white. Her people looked up at her with fear in their large, dark eyes. "We must ration what we have," she told them. "The council has promised to restore the trade routes. We must be patient." But patience was hard when children were hungry. Young Riva watched the broadcast from her apartment on Valorath. She had been born on Sereth. Her mother still lived there. In a small village near the northern lakes, Riva had sent her all the credits she could spare. But credits meant nothing if there was no food to buy. She thought about the data she had found 3 months ago, the data showing how much the humans had done. No one had listened to her then. Maybe they would listen now. She requested another meeting with Counselor Then. This time, to her surprise, the meeting was approved. She arrived at his office the next morning, carrying a data tablet loaded with her research. Then sat behind his massive desk, looking older and more tired than she remembered. "You're the analyst who sent those reports," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, Counselor. Tell me what you found." Riva took a deep breath and began. She explained how humans had quietly taken on responsibilities that no one assigned them, how they had patrolled routes that were officially unpatrolled, how they had maintained systems that were officially unmaintained, how they had responded to emergencies faster than anyone else because they had positioned their ships in places where help might be needed. They were everywhere, she said. But they never asked for recognition. They just did the work. And when they left, they took all that work with them. Then was silent for a long time. Then he waved his hand in dismissal. "Thank you for your research. I will consider it. Counselor, please. My homeworld is starving. We need to act now." "I said I will consider it." "You are dismissed." Riva left the office with anger burning in her chest. She had shown him the truth. She had given him proof. And still he did nothing. On a mining world called Keth 4, deep in a mountain tunnel, a worker named Brel collapsed. He was Mirani, a species of sturdy four-armed beings known for their strength, but even strength could not protect against sickness. The plague had started 3 weeks ago. First one worker fell ill, then 10, then 100. Now half the mining colony was sick, and the disease was spreading fast. The colony administrator sent an emergency request to the council. Medical ships needed, doctors needed, medicine needed. Please respond. The council's medical fleet received the request and began preparations. Their ships were docked at Valorath, nearly 2 weeks of travel away. They would arrive as soon as possible. In the old days, the human medical response team stationed in that sector would have arrived within 6 hours. They kept their ships ready at all times. They had doctors trained in diseases from 100 worlds. They had medicine for species they had never even met. But the humans were gone, and the sick on Keth 4 had 2 weeks to wait. Many would not survive that long. Dr. Minho Lee learned about Keth 4 from a news report on Earth. He was 72 years old, retired after a lifetime of service. He had designed the water purification systems used on 200 council worlds. He had trained engineers from a dozen species. He had given his best years to the galaxy, and the galaxy had given him nothing but contempt. He remembered the meetings where council officials talked over him, the times when his species was called primitive and emotional. The laughter, when humans suggested ideas that were later adopted without credit. He remembered all of it, but he also remembered the workers on those colony worlds. The families who drank clean water because of systems he built. The children who did not get sick because the purification worked. They had done nothing wrong. They were innocent. He turned off the news and went to his garden. The tomatoes were ripe and red. The beans were ready to pick. He worked in the soil until his back ached and his hands were dirty. Some things, he thought, you cannot fix from far away. Some lessons must be learned the hard way. On Valorath, High Speaker Cometh received an anonymous data packet. It arrived on his private channel, encrypted with a code that should have been unbreakable. His security team spent 4 hours trying to trace its origin. They failed. Cometh opened the packet alone in his office. Inside was a single file, a list of every system, service, and function that humanity had maintained during their membership in the Council. The list was 4,000 pages long. He began to read. After the first 100 pages, his hands were shaking. After the first 500, he could no longer sit still. He paced his office, reading from his tablet, his 4 eyes moving rapidly across the text. Water systems, power grids, patrol routes, emergency response protocols, medical supply chains, communication relays, navigation beacons, agricultural support programs, educational exchanges, scientific research sharing. The humans had touched everything. They had helped everyone. And they had asked for nothing. Cometh reached the end of the list as the sun rose over Valorith. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He simply stood at his window, looking out at the great city, and wondered how he had been so blind. The packet had included one final note, unsigned. You never said thank you. Not once. In 142 years, somewhere in the Outer Rim, Gorath the Krazen warlord raised a glass of stolen wine. His fleet had grown from 40 ships to 200. His territory had expanded across 3 sectors. His name was spoken with fear on 100 worlds. And this was only the beginning. He toasted to the empty stars, where human patrol ships had once stood guard. To our absent friends, he laughed. May they never return. The galaxy trembled, though it did not know it yet. The cracks had appeared. Soon, they would become chasms, and the fall had only just begun. 1 year after the humans left, the city of Velorath went dark. It started slowly. First, the lights in the outer districts flickered. Then the power rationing began. 2 hours without electricity each day, then 4, then 8. The floating towers that had glided gracefully through the sky now sat still, their engines cold. The fusion reactors that powered the capital were failing. They had been designed 40 years ago by a human engineer named Su Yun. She had built them to last a century, with detailed maintenance guides and backup systems for every component. But the guides were written in human technical language. The Valori engineers who tried to follow them made mistakes. Small mistakes at first, then bigger ones. Now the reactors were running at 60% capacity and falling. High Speaker Cometh had been removed from power 3 months ago. The Council had blamed him for the crisis, though the truth was more complicated. They needed someone to punish, and he was the easiest target. He now lived in exile on a distant moon, alone with his regrets. The new speaker was Lady Oveth of the Mirani. She was younger than Cometh, with gray-green skin and eyes that had seen too much suffering. Her own people had lost thousands to the plague on Keth 4. The medical ships had arrived too late. The disease had spread to 4 more worlds before it was contained. She inherited a council in chaos. Report, she said to her advisors, gathered in the dimmed council chamber. Emergency lights cast long shadows across the floor. Admiral Voss of the Valori military stepped forward. He was tall and rigid, his silver uniform covered in medals that now seemed meaningless. The Krazen control 30% of former council space. They have declared themselves an independent power. They demand tribute from any ship passing through their territory. And our response? We have no response, Speaker. Our military was designed for ceremony, not combat. The humans handled actual warfare. Lady Oveth closed her eyes. Continue. A Mirani economic advisor spoke next. 3 species have formally withdrawn from the Council. 7 more are considering withdrawal. Trade networks have collapsed in the outer sectors. Food shortages have been reported on 42 colony worlds. 42? Yes, Speaker. The number grows daily. The reports continued. Each one was worse than the last. Infrastructure failing. Systems breaking down. Alliances crumbling. The Council, which had stood for 3,000 years, was dying. On Earth, Admiral Han Bick watched the news from his home in the mountains. He was 68 years old, retired from the Terran Defense Fleet. His hair had gone white, but his eyes were still sharp. He had warned the council about the Krazen for 20 years. He had submitted reports, analysis, predictions. They had ignored everything. His wife, Minji, brought him tea. She sat beside him and watched the images of burning stations and fleeing refugees. "Do you feel satisfied?" she asked quietly. "Being right?" Han shook his head. "No, I feel tired and sad. Those are innocent people suffering, but it's not our responsibility anymore." "I know." He sipped his tea. "That's what makes it so hard." Far across the galaxy, Riva made a decision that would change her life. She had watched her homeworld suffer. She had watched the council fail. She had tried to warn them, and they had ignored her. Now she would do something they could not ignore. She would go to Earth. It was illegal. Former council members were forbidden from contacting withdrawn species. The punishment was exile, loss of citizenship, permanent disgrace. Riva did not care. She had already lost everything that mattered. She used her savings to buy passage on a smuggler's ship. It was small and dirty, crewed by beings who asked no questions as long as you paid. The journey took 3 weeks through unpatrolled space, dodging pirates and patrol ships alike. When she finally saw Earth, she wept. It was so small, so blue, so fragile looking against the blackness of space. How could this tiny world have produced a species that held the galaxy together? She landed at a civilian spaceport and was immediately detained. Terran security officers took her to a holding room and asked questions for 6 hours. She answered everything honestly. She was an analyst from the Ithrani. She had come to beg for help. She knew it was illegal. She did not care. Finally, they released her. Not because they believed her, but because they had no reason to keep her. She was no threat. She was just a desperate woman from a dying civilization. She had no plan, no contacts, no idea where to go. She walked out of the spaceport into a warm summer evening, surrounded by humans going about their daily lives. They looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. She would never have guessed that these beings had quietly saved the galaxy for over a century. She found a small hotel and rented a room. The next morning, she began searching for someone who would listen. It took her 2 weeks to find Captain Tae Kang. He had retired from the fleet 18 months ago, immediately after the withdrawal. He had moved to a rural area far from any city, bought a small farm, and started growing vegetables. His neighbors knew him as a quiet man who kept to himself. They had no idea he had once commanded 300 warships. Riva arrived at his farm on a sunny afternoon. The fields were green with growing things. A simple house stood at the end of a dirt road. Chickens scratched in the yard. It was peaceful in a way that made her heart ache. Tae met her at the door. He was older than his pictures, with more gray in his hair. His face was weathered from outdoor work. He wore simple clothes, stained with dirt. "I know who you are," he said before she could speak. "I saw the security reports. An Ithrani analyst who traveled illegally to Earth. You've caused quite a stir. I need to speak with you. Please." He studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. "Come in. I'll make tea." They sat in his small kitchen, surrounded by the smell of herbs drying in bundles on the walls. Riva told him everything. The council's collapse, the pirate attacks, the food shortages, the plagues, the failing power systems. She told him about her homeworld, her mother, her people starving. "Please," she said at the end, her voice breaking. "Please convince your people to come back. We need you. The galaxy needs you." Tae was quiet for a long time. He looked out the window at his fields, where the vegetables grew in neat rows under the afternoon sun. "Do you know why I became a farmer?" he asked finally. "No, because I was tired of fighting for people who hated me. I spent 30 years protecting council ships. I saved lives. I lost friends, and in all that time, not once did anyone from the council say thank you. Not once did they treat us as equals. We were servants to them, useful tools, nothing more." Riva felt tears on her face. I know how they treated you. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Did you ever thank a human?" Tae asked. "In your entire life, before you came here, did you ever thank a single human for anything?" Riva opened her mouth to answer, Then she closed it. She searched her memory, desperate to find one moment. One time when she had shown gratitude. She found nothing. I thought so, Tay said. He did not sound angry, just tired. That's the problem. It's not about apologies now. It's about all the years when apologies weren't necessary because respect would have been enough. He stood and refilled their teacups. I can't convince humanity to return, even if I wanted to. I don't have that power. We left because we chose to leave. We would only return if we chose to return. And right now, most humans have no desire to go back to being servants. Then what can I do? Riva whispered. I don't know. But I think you should start by going home and telling your people the truth. All of it. Let them decide what kind of future they want to build. Riva left the farm as the sun was setting. She walked down the dirt road with the captain's words echoing in her head. Behind her, Taekang stood in his doorway, watching her go. He did not hate her. He did not hate any of them. But he had given everything he had, and it had not been enough. Now he wanted nothing more than to grow his vegetables and live in peace. The galaxy had made its choice. Now it had to live with the consequences. 18 months after the humans left, the Galactic Council hit rock bottom. The Great Hall, once filled with representatives from 34 species, now held only 19. Empty seats stretched across the chamber like missing teeth. The lights had been dimmed to save power. The flower scent was gone, replaced by the stale smell of recycled air. Lady Oveth stood at the central platform, looking out at what remained. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. We have sent a formal request to the United Terran Federation, she announced. We have asked them to return to the Council, as equals, with full voting rights and recognition for their contributions. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some representatives looked hopeful. Others looked ashamed. We should have done this years ago, one of them muttered. We should have treated them fairly in the first place. Another replied. Lady Oveth raised her hand for silence. We have received their response. The chamber went quiet. Every eye focused on the speaker. They said nothing. Complete silence. No reply at all. The silence stretched on. Some representatives lowered their heads. Others stared blankly at the ceiling. The weight of their failure pressed down on everyone in the room. Outside the chamber, in the darkened streets of Velarath, the people struggled to survive. Food lines stretched around blocks. Water was rationed. Crime had increased as desperate people did desperate things. The floating city that had once been the jewel of the galaxy now felt like a dying beast, slowly bleeding out. Riva had returned from Earth 3 months ago. She had told everyone who would listen about what she learned. The captain's words, the truth about human feelings, the depth of the wound that the Council had inflicted. Most people did not want to hear it. It was easier to be angry at the humans for leaving than to admit that the Council had driven them away. It was easier to blame others than to accept responsibility. But some listened. Some understood. Riva now worked with a small group of Ithrani refugees who had fled their starving homeworld. They lived in a crowded shelter on the edge of Velarath, sharing what little they had. Every night, Riva told stories about Earth, about the farms and the oceans and the humans who had once protected them all. They were kind. She told the children, kinder than we deserved, and we never thanked them. On a military station far from Velarath, a secret meeting was taking place. Representatives from 5 species had gathered in a sealed room, their faces grim. We cannot wait any longer, said General Thorne of the Valori. He was younger than the generals who had come before him, promoted quickly because so many senior officers had retired in disgrace. The Krazen grow stronger every day. The outer colonies are being abandoned. If we do not act, there will be nothing left to save. What do you propose? Asked Admiral Kelleth of the Mirani. We propose to force the humans to return. The room went very quiet. Force them? Someone asked. Yes. We assemble what remains of our fleets. We travel to their solar system. We blockade their planet. We tell them they must return to their responsibilities, or face consequences. That is madness, Kelleth said. The humans defeated the Krazen for decades. What makes you think we can threaten them? Because they are emotional creatures. They care about civilian lives. If we threaten their trade routes, They're colonies. They will negotiate, rather than fight. The debate continued for hours. In the end, the decision was made. The coalition fleet would depart in 1 week. They had no better options. They were drowning, and they were willing to drag anyone down with them. Admiral Han Baek received the intelligence report on a quiet morning. He read it twice, then set down his teacup with careful precision. Minji, he called to his wife. I need to make some calls. Within 6 hours, he was no longer retired. The Terran Parliament had voted unanimously to recall him to active duty. The Terran Defense Fleet, which had been quietly upgraded and expanded since the withdrawal, mobilized with smooth efficiency. 300 warships gathered at the edge of human space. Han Baek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Silent Dawn. It was a new ship, built in the past year, equipped with technology that the Council had never seen. Sir, his communications officer said, the Coalition fleet is approaching. 200 ships. Mixed Valori, Mirani, and others. I see them. On the main screen, the Coalition fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. They formed a loose formation, their ships of various sizes and designs. Compared to the uniform human fleet, they looked disorganized, weak. A communication request came in. Han accepted it. General Thorne's face appeared on screen. He was trying to look confident, but Han could see the fear in his eyes. Admiral Baek, Thorne said, on behalf of the Coalition, I demand that humanity return to its responsibilities within Council space. You will resume patrol duties, maintenance obligations, and emergency response protocols immediately. Failure to comply will result in military action. Han Baek looked at him for a long moment. He had met generals like Thorne before, young men who had never faced real combat, who thought war was about speeches and demands. General, Han said quietly, I'm going to give you one chance to turn your ships around and go home. You are in no position to make demands. I'm not making demands. I'm offering mercy. Han leaned forward slightly. We left in peace. We asked nothing of you. We took nothing from you. And now you come to our home, with ships that cannot match ours, and threaten our families. He paused, letting the silence stretch. We will defend ourselves if we must. But we will not be your servants again. Not now. Not ever. This is not negotiable. Thorne's face had gone pale. He opened his mouth to respond. But Han continued. Look at your sensors, General. Count our ships. Analyze their signatures. Then look at your own fleet and ask yourself, what happens if you fire the first shot? There was a long pause. On the Coalition flagship, officers were studying their sensor data. What they saw made them very afraid. The human ships were not just numerous. They were advanced, far more advanced than anything the Coalition had expected. General Thorne turned away from the screen, conferring with his officers. Han waited patiently. He had all the time in the world. Finally, Thorne turned back. His face was gray with defeat. We will withdraw. For now, a wise decision, Han said. Go home, General. Take care of your people. That's what matters. The connection ended. The Coalition fleet began to turn, their ships moving slowly back the way they had come. Han watched them go without satisfaction. Sir, his communications officer said, there's a small refugee transport at the edge of the Coalition formation. It appears to be in distress. Han looked at the sensor data. A tiny ship, civilian class, packed with life signs. Ithrani signatures. It must have followed the Coalition fleet, hoping to reach human space. Send the Dawn's Wind to assist, he ordered. Full humanitarian supplies, medical team, whatever they need. Yes, sir. On the refugee ship, Riva pressed her face against the small window and watched the human escort vessel approach. She had convinced the Coalition to let her join the fleet, hoping to speak with human leaders directly. Now the Coalition was retreating, and she was stranded in the void between civilizations. The human ship pulled alongside them, a docking tube extended. Minutes later, human officers entered the refugee vessel, carrying food, water, and medicine. A young officer approached Riva. He was barely 30, with kind eyes. Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Jin Kang. We're here to help. Kang? Riva repeated. Are you related to Captain Tay Kang? Jin smiled softly. He's my father. He told me about you. Riva felt tears threatening to fall. We came to threaten your planet. Why are you helping us? Because you need help, Jin said simply. And because helping people in need is who we are. It always was, even when no one noticed. He helped her to a seat and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Around them, human medical officers treated the sick and hungry. The sounds of crying children slowly gave way to the sounds of relief. Riva looked out the window. The human fleet held its position, neither advancing nor retreating. They were not coming back to serve the council, but they had not abandoned their compassion. In that moment, she understood something important. The humans had not left because they stopped caring. They had left because caring without respect had broken their hearts. And now, somehow, she had to help build a galaxy where that kind of heartbreak could never happen again. 3 years after humanity left, the Galactic Council officially dissolved. Lady Oveth read the final declaration in a chamber that was nearly empty. Only 11 species remained, and most of them had already begun making separate plans. The great institution that had governed the galaxy for 3,000 years ended not with a war or a catastrophe, but with a quiet vote on a quiet afternoon. Let the record show, Lady Oveth said, her voice steady despite her sadness, that the Galactic Council ends its existence on this day. May whatever comes next be wiser than what came before. She stepped down from the platform for the last time. The lights in the Great Hall flickered once, then went out completely. The power systems had finally failed beyond repair, but endings, as some wise beings know, are often disguised as beginnings. In the months that followed, Lady Oveth traveled across the galaxy. She visited colony worlds and refugee camps. She spoke with leaders and common people alike. She listened more than she talked, learning what had gone wrong and what might go right. She found Riva on a small moon called Theron's Rest, working at a shelter for displaced Ithrani. The two women sat together in a garden that the refugees had planted, surrounded by flowers from a homeworld they might never see again. I want to build something new, Lady Oveth said. Not another council. Something different. Something based on real equality and mutual respect. Riva thought about Captain Tay Kang and his quiet farm. She thought about Lieutenant Jin Kang and the blanket he had wrapped around her shoulders. She thought about all the humans who had given so much and asked for so little. If you build it, Riva said carefully, it cannot be like before. Everyone must contribute. Everyone must receive. And no one, no matter how small or young their species, should ever be treated as less. I know, Lady Oveth agreed. That is exactly what I intend. They worked together for 6 months, drafting principles and gathering support. Other species joined them, the Mirani, the remaining Valori, who had learned humility, smaller species who had watched the council fall and wanted something better. They called their new alliance the Open Accord. It was smaller than the council had been, humbler. It made no grand claims about governing the galaxy. Instead, it offered a simple promise. Member species would help each other as equals, with respect and gratitude, or not at all. The invitation to humanity was written personally by Lady Oveth. It was short and honest. We are not asking you to save us, she wrote. We are asking if you would like to be our friends, as equals, with full recognition of all you have done and all you are. We understand if you say no. We understand if you say nothing at all. But we wanted you to know that some of us have learned, some of us have changed, and we hope, one day, to prove it to you. The message traveled across space to Earth. It arrived at the Terran Parliament building on a spring morning, when the cherry trees were in bloom. Ambassador Una Park, now 70 years old and long retired, was asked to review it. She read the words 3 times, then set the paper down and looked out at the pink blossoms falling like snow outside her window. What do you think? Asked the young aide, who had brought her the message. I think, Una said slowly, that these are very pretty words. But words are easy. Actions are hard. So we should refuse. I didn't say that. Una stood, her old joints protesting, and walked to the window. I said we should wait. Watch them. See if their actions match their words, and if they do, perhaps, in time, we can consider opening a door. The debate in Parliament lasted for months. Some humans wanted nothing to do with the rest of the galaxy. The wounds were still fresh. The memories of contempt and dismissal had not faded. Why risk being hurt again? But others argued differently. They spoke of the innocent beings who had never been cruel, the children who had been born after humanity left, who had done nothing wrong, the possibility that things could be different, if given a chance. In the end, the Parliament reached a compromise. Humanity would not rejoin any alliance, or accept any obligations, but they would open one door. A small one. A beginning. They would build a shared academy. The academy was constructed on a space station in neutral territory, far from any homeworld. 6 species contributed to its building. Humans provided the design, based on their own educational traditions. The Athrani contributed art and culture programs. The Mirani built the living quarters. Others added what they could. Above the main entrance, in every language of the galaxy, they carved words suggested by an unlikely source. Her name was Nari Kim, and she had spent 40 years as a janitor in the old council building. She had cleaned floors and fixed broken things and smiled at people who never smiled back. Before she died, at the age of 92, she had given Riva a data chip containing her personal observations, her memories, her wisdom. The words she suggested were simple. Kindness is not weakness, silence is not surrender, and leaving was never the end. The academy opened on a bright morning, 3.5 years after humanity had first walked away. The first class of students arrived on ships from a dozen worlds. They were young, curious, nervous. They had grown up hearing stories about the fall of the council and the silence of the humans. Now they were meeting each other for the first time. Jin Kang, who had become a diplomat like his father had once been a warrior, stood at the back of the welcoming ceremony. He watched the young beings find their seats, fumbling with unfamiliar customs, making awkward attempts at communication. Riva found him there. She was older now, with lines around her eyes and silver in her hair. She had become an ambassador for the Athrani diaspora, spending her life building bridges between worlds. "You look thoughtful," she said. "I'm remembering my father's farm." Jin replied. "The day you came to ask him for help. He was so tired then, so hurt. I remember. I think about that day often. He passed away last year, you know. Peacefully, in his garden. The tomatoes were ripe." Riva bowed her head. "I'm sorry. He was a good man. He was. And he would have loved to see this." Jin gestured at the hall full of young students. All these beings, learning together, sharing together, treating each other with respect. "Do you think it will last?" Jin was quiet for a moment. Below them, a young human girl had started talking to an Ithrani boy. They were showing each other pictures on their tablets, laughing at something neither of them quite understood. "I don't know," Jin admitted. "History says probably not. People forget. They get comfortable. They start taking things for granted again. That's a sad thought. Maybe. But look at those two." He pointed at the children below. "They don't know any of the history. They don't know about the contempt, or the fall, or the blockade. All they know is that someone from another world is showing them something interesting. And they're happy." He turned to Riva, and for the first time, she saw his father's eyes looking back at her. The same quiet strength. The same tired hope. "Maybe that's all we can do," Jin said. "Plant seeds. Tell stories. Hope that the next generation is better than we were. It's not much, but it's something." Riva extended her hand, a human gesture she had learned years ago. Jin took it. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For then, for now. For giving us a chance to try again. That's what we do," Jin said with a small smile. "It's who we are." Below them, a bell rang. The first classes were about to begin. Students hurried to their places, a river of different colors and shapes and sizes, all flowing toward a shared future. The human girl and the Athrani boy ran past together, racing each other down the corridor, their laughter echoing off the walls. The galaxy had fallen. The council had crumbled. Billions had suffered. But here, In this small station, floating in the darkness between stars, something new was growing, something fragile and precious and worth protecting. It would not fix everything. It would not erase the past. But it was a beginning, and sometimes, a beginning is enough. Outside the station windows, the stars burned cold and bright, as they had for billions of years. They did not care about the small beings who lived and died in their light. They did not remember the council or the withdrawal or the silent years that followed. But the beings remembered. And they were learning. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly, they were learning. The academy bell rang again, calling everyone to class. And in every corridor, in every room, students from across the galaxy opened their books and began the long work of understanding each other. The humans had left in silence, but they had returned with something even more powerful, a second chance.